Now, for many years, the message has been clear. Avoid fat if you want to avoid blocked arteries and bulging waistlines. But one cardiologist is aiming to turn that on its head, saying that instead of drugs, doctors should prescribe a high-fat diet to patients to try and tackle the big killers, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes and obesity. Let's have a look.
Ancel Keys would become famous for his demonizing stance on saturated fat and cholesterol.
By the 1980s, he'd realized that some of those really weren't standing the test of time, and he couldn't get his papers published. And he was furious.
In Italy, in Campania region, in province of Salerno, in Cilento, in Pollica, we have a treasure.
The scientific evidence is very clear.
I think one of the key things of the Mediterranean diet is the variety of food.
That adopting a lifestyle that involves a high-fat Mediterranean diet.
We use extra virgin olive oil.
What nuts contain are fatty acids.
And another interesting thing is the oily fish.
Even the dessert has been cooked in olive oil.
Mobility is hugely important. Going to work is like going to war.
Movement really does heal.
Movement, stress reduction, and stopping smoking is more powerful than any drug in preventing heart disease, treating heart disease, and improving one's physical state, emotional state, mental state, and longevity.
Well, that is a clip of the documentary The Big Fat Fix, which aims to change the way we think about health and features the cardiologist who we saw in that clip, Aseem Malhotra, who's with me now. Thanks for coming in. I suppose, in a way, we all know about the Mediterranean diet. This seems similar, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's actually going to the root area where a lot of the dietary advice has come from over the last few decades, and what we try to do is actually correct what has been decades of misinformation. You know, we've actually had flawed science in relation to saturated fat, cholesterol and heart disease. It's driven a huge market of low-fat foods, excess sugar consumption, financially driven dietary guidelines. And then we've also, you know, putting it in context, Tim, it's also about the fact we've got financially driven medicine rather than evidence-based medicine. And when you combine that together, it produces an epidemic of misinformation and ill health.
OK, well let's try and clarify that now. So your film is all about full-fat foods, but not saturated fats necessarily. Well, maybe to come to that.
Yeah.
But vegetables, oily fish, all those things that we sort of know about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. So there's a few things there. When it comes to fat, I think we've unfairly demonized it, and we talk about foods such as olive oil, oily fish, nuts, but saturated fat, which has been unfairly demonized for a long time based upon its link or thought that it was linked to heart disease, actually is not true. The scientific evidence now tells us that things like full-fat cheese and yogurt can also help you make you feel full, but they do not clog the arteries, and it's really important we correct that misinformation because people's fear of fat has led to people increasing refined carbohydrates and sugar. Then we also bring other aspects of it. I mean, I'm a practicing cardiologist. I didn't learn anything in medical school about the impact of lifestyle and health. And when you actually look at the data, about 80% of cardiovascular disease is actually related to poor lifestyle, which is poor diet, lack of activity, stress, smoking. And in fact, it's not just about prevention. You can actually treat many of these chronic diseases by changing people's lifestyle. So, for example, type 2 diabetes is actually a condition of carbohydrate intolerance. If patients reduce their refined carbohydrate consumption like bread and pasta, reduce it and also cut out the sugar, a lot of them can potentially even reverse their type 2 diabetes, but most people don't know that. And I think that's really one of the major issues we need to cover.
OK, so a mixture of all those things.
Yeah.
How do you then introduce that as policy? I mean, we're speaking in London, we've got a National Health Service here. You know, it rings bells with me from what I hear within the National Health Service. How do you roll this out internationally?
Yeah, a very good point. Tim, we need a collective effort. First and foremost, we need to get the information and the science right. We need to get that to individuals. But actually, when you look at what's going to impact on population health, it's going to need policy changes. Just to give you an example, just if dietary policies were introduced across the world that increase people's consumption of healthy foods like vegetables and nuts and oily fish, etc., and curb the junk food consumption even slightly, it's been estimated within 1 year, if you had a magic wand, within 1 year, you could halve the deaths from cardiovascular disease from 20 million a year to 10 million globally. The other thing also to mention, Tim, which is important, is that there is a lot of people now coming out who are health campaigners who want to challenge the establishment because we're actually going against establishment advice. And what we are up against are very powerful vested interests where there has been, unfortunately, a collusion between medical guideline boards, if you like, and industry for financial gain. And it's gone to the extent where certain people, like, for example, there's a chap in Australia who's a very respected orthopedic surgeon called Gary Fetka. The Australian Medical Board have banned him from advising his patients to cut out sugar, which is actually quite outrageous. And the complaint came from somebody anonymously, probably connected in some way to the industry. So these are the challenges we also have, and we need to address these as well.
OK, it's been shown to British parliamentarians. You can get it online. And just to remind us the name, Big Fat.
Yeah, the bigfatfix.com. You can download it there, but we're planning to take this around the world. We screened it in the European Parliament last week. Planning to take it to India, Australia, and really try and get policy change and people's thinking change around diet and health.